Okay, last example, example 3, we're going to graph 2 periods of this function. We're going to look at y equals 1/2 tangent of x over 2 minus pi over 2 plus 1. All right, so I need to write this in standard form, which means that I need to factor out a 1/2, okay, from here. So here's A, here's B, H, right? I'm going to move to the right, and K, I'm going to move up. So I have this fake amplitude right here, so that's 1/2. Okay, my period is pi over B, so pi over 1/2, that's 2 pi. Okay, that means that the distance between my critical points is 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. Okay, I'm going to start at my phase shift, which is pi, right? Normally I start at 0, but we're shifting right pi units. I'm going to start at my phase shift, that's pi, which means I'm going to end, if my period would normally end at 2 pi, but I've got this phase shift in there, that's going to shift that over to 3 pi. Okay, so let's set up a graph here. All right. Okay, so I'm going to make this 1, this 2, -1, -2. Okay, so my first period is going to end at 3 pi. It's going to start at pi. I'm going to break this up into quarters, and there's going to be my second period. Okay, so I need to find some critical points. Okay, I'm going to just try to add these in my head if I can. I know that pi is 2 pi over 2. Okay, I know that pi is 2 pi over 2. Okay, and each of these is going a distance of pi over 2. So this would be 2 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is 4 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is 5 pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is 6 pi over 2, which is 3 pi, plus pi over 2 is 7 pi over 2, plus pi over 2 is 8 pi over 2, 9 pi over 2, and 10 pi over 2. Okay, so that works nicely in this case because this is 2 pi over 2. Okay, it may work, may not. It's always going to work if you're starting your graph at 0. If you've got a phase shift in there, it may work, may not, just to add like that. 4 pi over 2 is going to reduce to 2 pi. Okay, the better you understand adding and subtracting fractions, the easier it's going to be for you to get these critical points. 10 pi over 2 is 5 pi. Okay. All right, so here is my graph set up. Okay, I have a vertical shift up. Okay, I have a vertical shift up, which means that my midline is going to move up 1 unit. Okay, so my midline is going to move up 1 unit. All right, so I'm looking at tangent. Okay, I am gonna graph this using a table, but I'm gonna show you just using the pattern first. Okay, so at tangent, at my starting point, okay, the first point I have is gonna be on that midline. Okay, my starting point here is pi. Don't have a reflection, so that's nice. So that's on the midline. My second point is half a unit above that midline, and that's why, again, why I call that fake amplitude. Okay, then I have an asymptote. Okay, then I've got an asymptote here. Okay, so then my next point, okay, is going to be 1 unit below the midline. Then my next point is on the midline, and then my next point is 1 unit above. And then I have another asymptote. Okay, then I've got another asymptote. Okay, and then I finish out, I've got 1 unit below, 1 unit, or I'm sorry, this is half a unit below the midline, then I'm on the midline. Okay, and now I am, whoops, no, I did that right, okay. Right, and so this comes up this way, this comes up this way, this goes down like that. So there's the graph of my tangent function. Okay, you can graph it this way, right? We're using the parent function and we're just transforming it. We're shifting all the points, pi units to the right and 1 unit up, okay? And this has a vertical compression or a vertical shrink of 1/2. Okay, so those points are getting shrunk. This is a horizontal stretch. So you can graph it like this, just using your period, your fake amplitude, and what you know about the parent function. You can also graph it using a table. Okay, so if we're going to graph using a table, okay, let me show you. Oops. Okay, if I set this up using a table, and I'm going to use a calculator as well. Okay, so if I plug this in, I've got y equals 1/2 tangent of x over 2 minus pi over 2 plus 1. Okay, so you can graph, like I said, using a table. You're going to plug in your critical points. So we're going to plug in, and I'm just going to do 1 period, pi, 3 pi over 2, 2 pi, 5 pi over 2, and 3 pi. Okay, so there's 1 period right there. Okay, and then you need to evaluate this. So I would say y equals 1/2 tangent. I'm plugging in pi for x. So I have pi over 2 minus pi over 2. Okay, plus 1, tangent of pi over 2 minus pi over 2, that's 0, times 1/2 is 0, plus 1 is 1. Okay, you can also plug this into your calculator. You still have to be careful how you do this. You can use the fraction button if you want. Okay, so you would say 1/2, okay, tangent, and you need to make sure that your calculator is in radian mode, which mine is. Okay, so 1/2 tangent. I plugged in pi, so again, if you want to use that fraction button, you can. I've got pi over 2 minus pi over 2, okay, plus 1. And when I plug that in, I get 1. Okay, I'm going to do one more. I'm not going to do all of these. But, okay, so this would be y equals 1/2 tangent of, so I've got 3 pi over 2 divided by 2 minus pi over 2 plus 1. Okay, so again, you can plug that in. I would probably just go up to this function and hit enter. Okay, and just go back and edit this. would put a fraction in there because that now needs to be 3 pi over 2. Okay, and I get 1.5, and again, you can put that in fraction form. So that's 3 halves, or 1.5, however you want to look at this. So at 3 pi over 2, I should be at 1.5. Okay, and so you can calculate all of these, and you're going to get the same graph. So this point is telling us when we're at pi on the x-axis, we should be at 1 on the y, which is where we were, right? When we were at pi on the x-axis, we're up at 1. Okay, then we got, when we're at 3 pi over 2, we should be at 1.5, which is where we were. 3 pi over 2 is 1.5. Okay, so if you continue plugging in these critical points, you're going to get the same y values that we graphed, just basically using the parent function and transformation. So you can graph either way. It's up to you. Okay, but there's 2 different methods for that.